Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. We are decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. If you're not familiar with the Symphony of the Night decompilation project, go to soten.z.dev, where you can learn more about the project. You can see the progress we've made on several overlays. Lately, we've been looking at the long library and N01, which is the outer wall. Only a few functions left in N01. I think I have at least one of those in my local branch. And let's, we were kind of running out of stuff to do in N01, so I think we'll move on to long library. There's one thing I want to find before we go do that, though, which is, I was interested in the Medusa heads and seeing if they have been identified for something else that I am working on. So let's go over and do that and see if we can find the Medusa heads. I'm gonna rebase. Good evening, Antoine. Good to have you. And let's see if there's any comments about Medusa in the outer wall. Oh, good. We have a whole file dedicated to the Medusa head. That's great. So we know where that is. Mostly I wanted to look at the movement, and the movement seems like a relatively straightforward sine wave, and I just wanted to see if that was true or not. And maybe it's a lookup table. So it looks like their velocity is semi-random. I'm looking for the state machine. Let's see that. And it looks like Medusa head yellow and blue are only differentiated by one parameter. So I think that this might be the trick, and it looks like it is a simulated sine wave. The acceleration is decreasing until it goes negative. And my guess is that somewhere in here along the way is that there is a something that's going to flip that, which looks like this velocity y, is going to change the acceleration. And so the acceleration slows down until we get to zero velocity, and then goes back in the other direction. Okay, that's all I wanted to look at regarding the Medusa heads. And now we can try to find something new. There's still quite a bit in the long library, and my guess is that there's a lot that hasn't been deduped yet, so that might be the best next course of action, is to dedupe anything that hasn't been yet. So I'm going to be looking for include ASM, and I want to see the splits. So there's things in the shop. Oh, there is just a little bit more to do with the shop functions. On Thursday of last week, I almost had that one of the shop functions finished, so that might be worth looking at. Some still in a bunch of unknown splits. Not sure if those are really unknown or not. I'll look at the duplicates report for the library. So over the weekend, I was looking at, so what I want to do is find any, let's just look for any false. All right, so we have it looks like a bunch of duplicates that haven't been split yet. So debug. There's a bunch here actually that look like they're maybe matching incorrectly. That is a known issue. There's some splits that haven't been made that probably would benefit from being done as well. Interesting that this normal function, some of these are, sometimes they're system calls, sometimes they're just functions that call other functions that are, so from the SDK, sometimes the function is just an indirection to a BIOS function. And specifically, I was interested in the library, though. So we do have a bunch that can be deduped in the library. If feel free to chat if you'd want to see what any of that looks like. I'm just mostly making sure that I'm not going to be working on a function that is has already been done before. So I mentioned I was looking at Splat. Splat is the tool that we use to split files, and was a tool originally written for the Mario 64 decomp that we can now use basically on just about anything, and allows you to take an overlay, which is kind of like a library or a DLL, an SO, something like that, but it's loaded directly into memory instead of being linked in any way. And you can take that and split it. And so I was working yesterday at upgrading Splat to, we're maybe 6 months behind on the Splat version. And each version of Splat seems to have something that breaks things along the way. In this case, we had to get rid of the include macro option, and I added some include guards for one of our assembly files and updated it. Also, one of these, the N64 segment type, which was an empty class that derived from segment, was missing. So Orpheus Flow, great question. I'll get to that in a second. So some minor changes to get up to 27.3. I think the current version is 32.2, something along those lines. The reason that I wanted to update Splat is because I wanted to work on it, and Soten has a nice corpus of config. We have custom extensions, lots of different overlays to work on. For N64 projects, you only ever have one overlay. So for a PlayStation project where you have effectively every file as its own overlay, you get a lot of variation. And so I think it's a pretty good test bed for different things. And what I was mostly interested in was some of the performance aspects of Splat. Not that Splat is particularly slow, but it does take up about 30 to 40% of the total build time. And so I've done some profiling, and I know where some hotspots are that seem like relatively low-hanging fruit, or some relatively small data structure changes. Nothing, I don't even think any of the logic really needs to change, just some data structures. And so the easiest way to do that would be to run the head of Splat, which, like I said, is quite a bit, 4 to 6 months ahead. And so coincidentally, Sozu was working on the same thing because he wanted a newer version of HASM, which later versions of Splat use. And we both submitted very similar PRs within a few hours of each other yesterday. And it turns out this builds and works fine during build, but it breaks some of our other tooling. I think I know what the cause of the break is. Unfortunately, it was a change that I didn't see documented as I was going through, but previously Splat would create a matching directory for any functions that were matching, even if you didn't have any functions that were matching. And now it does not. And so I have to decide, basically, does our tooling change to accommodate the change in Splat, or do I go back to the team that's working on that and either provide a patch to revert that, or go forward. What does Splat do that we need it during building? Splat takes the overlays that we're working on and basically extracts the code that we haven't decompiled yet, so that we can compile back a matching binary incrementally. I mentioned SozuD. He is working on a SciQ decompilation project, which is taking the PS1 SDK and decompiling that, and he's doing it a little differently, where basically you need an entire object or .lib as they were shipped to be able to compile and get a match. But on Soten and on some other projects, Splat allows us to incrementally match as we get functions, one function at a time. You don't have to rerun it too often, but it is run for every CI build. So every CI build basically starts fresh. When you're just working on the project, for the most part, you can run it. It's usually good to run it once after rebasing. Often there is some changes that may or may not affect how things are split. And I can show, I can open the long library, since that is probably what we'll be working on, to get an idea of what that config looks like. So here's our long library. We're pointing to lib.bin, which is the library overlay. Splat is going to generate a linker script for us, which is going to take the compiled C code, which includes the assembly that Splat extracts. And Splat is going to create this linker script to basically put everything back in the same order that it was extracted. Some other things around how we can identify symbols that maybe we haven't decompiled yet, does some checks to make sure we have the right file, and then offsets into the file for how we want to split it. And I mentioned earlier when I was showing the dupes report, which is somewhere in this mess of tabs, that there are, for example, Stone Rose has a duplicate function for something in here at offset, what would that be? 8 plus, or C minus 8 would be 4CF 6C. And so we should have an additional split somewhere around here as well. So that would be in this file, and there's some more work that needs to be done there. So that's kind of an update on some of the stuff that I was working on. And so hopefully, I think all that's missing, there's actually every version of Splat that comes out has, it's seemingly a small breaking change for this project. And so I had gotten up to 0.27.3, 0.28, which is the next released version. There is a default config change for a key that we don't have in any of our splat config, and we use the old default, rely on the old default, so we have to go through and modify all of our splat config to add this new default. It'd actually be kind of nice to have maybe a global settings so that we can do that, and that's something it might be possible. All right, so let's go back to the library and see what there is to see. I think I'm going to start at the beginning in this first C file. And anything that doesn't have the _US is definitely going to be a function that has been matched to something else already. And so we'll ignore those. And I'll just see what else is in first C file. Some of these, like I said, may be duplicates that just the tooling for trying to figure out which symbols matched didn't find right away. Something like this, where it was given the symbol ST0 entity hit background block, our tooling should be a little smarter. ST0 is the prologue stage, and these are used to differentiate the functions when they're used in multiple overlays, but maybe different slightly. Because so the Xbox 360 version, for example, everything is compiled into a single binary. And if we have multiple functions with the same name, we run into linking errors. Let's see, I'm just gonna run find and grab something that way. I do want just the ones in first C file. So a bunch of small functions. Let's get something a little bigger. I'll go right about here, and I'm going to look this up to see if it is in the dupes report. Yeah, so Orpheus Flow saying 2 megabytes of RAM in the PlayStation were a reason for all those overlays. And what's interesting, I think, about Symphony of the Night being a 2D game, using a lot of sprites, it really does use all of that 2 megabytes. And somebody growing up through the 16-bit era, 8-bit, 16-bit era, and so that would be 16 megabits in like Genesis speak. That's a ton of data from a 16-bit perspective. But the sprites color palette is much deeper. You have a lot more animation frames. Some of the rooms are significantly larger. I was just playing, I've never played Legacy of Kain until just recently. I picked up the Evercade cart, and yeah, it is extremely slow. One thing that I didn't realize, and I would have assumed differently prior to working on this project, was when you're walking through the CD room, that overlays would start loading like halfway through the CD loading room, but they don't. They really don't load until you're almost out the door on the other side, which is seems like a missed opportunity. At least that's what it appears to be in DuckStation. All right, so this function is duplicated, but coincidentally, it's duplicated in the library. And the duplication isn't that close. 0.91 is pretty far. The way the duplicates report works is it takes the opcode from all of the MIPS instructions in a function, and then does a oh no, I'm forgetting the Levenshtein distance between the two functions, basically the n squared. This is an n squared version of this, so this report gets slower and slower every time it runs as we add new overlays. And usually duplicates are much closer than 0.91. So these will be similar. They may have a similar structure. The issue with using just the opcode is all simple mathematic operations in MIPS have the same opcode, and they just have a specifier. And that isn't being considered. So we'll see a lot of times like inverted versions of the functions. There might be a function that scans left through the entities and a function that scans right. And when you pull the instructions for those and just look at the opcodes, they're identical, but the implementations end up being somewhat different. Yeah, so it is tricky to load. I'm pretty sure all the red room stuff for the most part though is not in the stage overlay. So yeah, I don't know. All right, so I'm going to grab that 280 function, and then we can look at the other one if depending on how far I can get through this one. And decomp.me is the tool of choice for working on these. The other thing that I was looking at, not this one, I'll use that tab for my next one. No, it wasn't this one either. I was going to talk about something else that Sir Pounce brought up. It doesn't look like there is any jump table here. This one looks reasonably straightforward. Only 193 lines. I do want to see if this is one of the entity functions. It doesn't show up there, so it looks like it might be a helper function. Let's also see if we can find anything else that's calling this to try to get the signature before moving on. Oh, maybe it is an entity function. It is referenced at the beginning. It's possible that this part of the library hasn't been extracted yet. Well, that is certainly something. So this is an entity update function, and so the signature is going to be just entity with a void return type. And we'll call that self. At the time when the N64 came out, so Orpheus is mentioning that the N64 basically had its entire address space available in the cartridge, and you could just go. You didn't have to load anything necessarily. There were still games that did load. If you had to, RAM was still faster than the cartridge data. But the cartridge access obviously is much faster still than CD. And I remember it coming out and just being bewildered that in when did the 96, 90, somewhere around there, that a console would launch without a CD drive, not knowing all the Sony Nintendo stuff that had just gone down. And I wouldn't say that it really hurt the N64 at all. just different that it ended up going that way. All right, so we have a base decompile. We have a bunch of global symbols that will need to be fixed up. Some labels that we'll have to figure out what their structure is. They look like just simple loops. And it looks like the switch probably has maybe one or two things that may add some complexity. We'll see. I think this destroy entity, for example, being part of the else condition, way up here, likely gets moved up. But what I want to do first is figure out what is going on here. And actually, I know what's going on. And that's the primitive structure. I likely have the wrong definition of that. And so M2C was basing it on the PSP version of the primitive structure, but we need the PlayStation version. And so I'll get a new decompile. It is a custom one. M2C originally stood for MIPS to C, but now it stands for Machine to C, because it does more than just MIPS. And fixing that primitive definition gave us a decompile, and starting at 70%, that's not too bad. So I'm going to go through and clean up a couple things quickly, and then we'll get into some of the more complicated things. PlayStation version, this is going to be using GCC, optimized GCC. So oftentimes M2C will pull variables out into, or pull loads out into variables that we don't need. So when I see that, I'll kill those right away. Allocate primitives is going to return an index into the primitive table. And so I'm going to be somewhat careful because the V0 register is being used for something else as well. I don't want to just nuke that variable. And it looks like up here is the only place where it is being used as the primitive index. I can look, and I have not looked too closely at M2C. I don't know that it affects, or it will decompile x86 yet. I think it's primarily PowerPC and MIPS. Matt Kempster is the, yeah, it's just PowerPC and MIPS. I'll post a GitHub link in there. I think, yeah, IDA and Ghidra are probably the best options for x86 at the moment. So there is a this rotate trans perspective function. What game are you working on, Orphis? So we have a bunch of these. We don't have the names from the SDK in the signature, which is a little unfortunate. I think the S vectors are all SV, just SV0 through 1. These longs are, I think they call them SXY0. I have that up somewhere. Yeah, SXY0 through 3, and then P and then flag. Oh, interesting. I've not played. I have La Mulana 1. Not played it. I think I have a copy from. Let's see if I have the PSP version. Not PSP. Sorry, the Vita version. Oh, that's cool. So has the Wii version been decompiled? This series of GTE function calls is somewhat nice because we can go through and basically we know the types of everything based on what's being passed here. And so M2C will pull some of that out. Things like SP28, it identified as matrix. I think we'll just call it matrix. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. There's been so much tooling on the MIPS and PowerPC side that it may be easier, but I do somewhat wonder if having the other tooling. So what I'll probably do along this is we have the PlayStation 1 and the PSP version of the game, which largely use the same code. The PSP version of the game is compiled without optimization. So we don't have debug symbols, but something pretty close. So this SP18 should be a vector, and the store here is a store in the first field of that vector, which will be VX. And so M2C didn't figure that out, but we can get that information and figure that out, and that's why we need humans in the pipeline for this. I just want to check. There's two types of vectors that GT uses. One is a 32-bit points for each of the fields, and the other is 16-bit. So just making sure I have the right one. And we'll find SP18. And then this becomes VX. One interesting thing, though, we'll have to see if this is the case. We're setting the VX field specifically. And as I get closer to getting a match, what I want to see is, this SP1C and SP20, these are actually setting other fields in this vector. But M2C was basing it on the stack pointer instead. So we do have all three fields that need to be set. Sometimes we don't see that where data is not initialized, and that would cause an issue, possibly. But that will fix that. And then I believe these 48, 4C, and 50 we actually have a significantly longer argument list than M2C was generated for us. So that's going to have to be figured out. Basically, anything past, I think past the fifth argument, maybe it's the fourth, is pushed to the stack. And it seems like M2C didn't figure that out. Those were arguments. Okay. What else do we need to do? So I'm going to do some variable renaming. These top, actually, I think all of the var A0s start with A2. Can be called prim or primitive. The primitive type is basically an overload of PS1's polyGT4 structure with all of the unused fields used for game specific things. So we're coming through. This will become just a while loop. We don't need the second check. And then these GPU buffers symbols. Oh, I don't have a columnar selection. These are all arrays, fields, and then fields in those nested structs. And these are just how we can map those as symbols when Splat is extracting them. Oh, no, those aren't arrays. And these are in order. If these were not in order or in reverse order, I would assume that they are being just set in line. But they are in RGB order, so that does seem like that would be correct. The symbols basically are just computed into the address, so we don't get anything there for free, unfortunately. All right, so I am going to move this up. This is somewhat interesting that destroy entity shows up here. I mentioned this at the beginning. So we're checking primitive index, whether it's equal or not to -1. I'm going to change that to a positive check. And if it is equal to -1, do the destroy entity and return. And then get rid of that condition, which should bump everything in. And we can change this to a break. And that should help just a little bit. It is somewhat interesting, though, that this ends up getting aligned not where I expect it to be. Let's go up and see what's going on there. So the destroy entity check is up here. So we can do the primitive index. I think that was a -1 then in the opposite side of the branch, or a check for equality there, and the other side of this branch is just not where it had originally put it. So let's put it. And that looks better. There may be another. No, because this returned. I was going to say there may be another case where that destroy entity call is being made, and they're just optimized into the same location. But I don't see anything else obvious where that would hold. So I think that first condition looks fine. First case. So let's move on down. So there's some issues with the stack at the moment. There appear to be a couple more variables that either I don't have or are being optimized out. And those should fall out as the rest of this gets worked out. This subtraction is happening out of order, which may or may not indicate that these are being done in a different order. The stack pointer is wrong as well. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. What I am going to worry about, though, is this rotation transform. I'm going to pull a signature for that, which is 4 S vectors, 4 packed XY pairs, a P pointer, and a flag pointer. P and flag, I think, are both returned, so we don't have to set those beforehand. The others, I believe, are all things that should be set and passed in. Maybe XY, it's not. Grab the docs. No, the SXYs are all returned, and those are screen coordinates. So basically, we're passing in 4 vectors and getting back where on the screen that quad is going to end up. So for that, we need 4 S vectors. We only have 3 at the moment. And an S vector is 4 16-bit values. So we're looking at 64. Our stack pointers are only 4 bytes apart, which suggests that they're pointers to S vectors and not the S vectors themselves. So I am going to create them as if they were there. They are not, nothing is setting these. Which is troubling. I'm going to put them in place and then see what may be going on. And then we need XY pairs. And those are passed by reference. And then a P and a flag. and SP48. So I want to see where 48 is being used prior to this call. So it is the, it looks like this V0. So there's going to be some work done down here, and I'll work that out in a second, but that looks like it's the V0 vector. And specifically X. Too many arguments. Let's look at that again. Oh, it's just S vectors. So these are all coming from this global. Let's go look at that global. My guess is that these aren't local, but they're references to an S vector array, which may or may not be a pointer to S vectors, maybe an array of S vectors. So let's look at that and see what that is. My guess is that this has not been decompiled. So yeah, this is the correct size for an S vector. The Z field has a value, but everything else is 0. So something in the library which would have a Z component. I can think of the books. There are 2 different types of books. What else in the library has a Z component? And there is a reference to this other value here. Rotate matrix. Rotate matrix takes a long. I don't believe that, but so an angle. No, it takes an S vector. So possibly in the rotate matrix signature that I have has long as the first arg, but it's a oh no, never mind. I'm looking at rotate matrix Y. Rotate matrix S vector. There we go. So it does have an S vector. What is missing then is where these other values come from. So these 2 come consecutively in memory, and there's a couple that come afterwards. I'm going to make the assumption now that this is an array, and that these are all part of the same array, and that the rest of these are also part of that array. But I don't know yet if that's going to work out in my favor. So we'll see. For now, I can work that out. Still too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's why. Wrong function signature. So off screen, I'm looking at the libref, which is one of the documents that came with the PS1 SDK. So this only has one. I got it. Only one SXY. So we don't need all these others. So for long pointers, why are you not happy? I did get rid of V0, and that originally was stack pointer 48, which is SXY. All right, a little closer. Let's see where we were last time. 7. It's looking a bit better. I'm going to, since it's not the perspective 4, I'm going to assume that I was wrong. And that these were just S vectors that were being referenced directly. Argument 3 and 4 are wrong types. I've seen this a couple times recently. A long and a sine 32 should be the same. And it's possible that I just don't have those types. In this case, a long is 32 bits and an int is 32 bits. So I'm a little surprised that GCC is complaining there. My preference when I'm working on the SDK functions is to use the standard C types for primitives. Not everybody does that. A lot of people will use the like decomp standard S32, S16. I like when the signatures match the documentation though, so usually I'll keep them that way. I'm not sure what's going on here yet, but I should be able to simplify this. So here we're just subtracting 7c until, or as long as we're greater than negative 3f. 3f is 48, so it's 63, negative 63. Don't see a reason not to just use SXY directly. And I guess we'll find out what that variable is used for. It's not being used for anything. So there's some something missing along the way. Either I replaced a variable that I shouldn't have, or something else. Let me back up. I see what I did. I can go this far. So it's this var a1 that is what is being tracked, and eventually it's going to be used down here as our x coordinate. So var a1, I'm going to rename x, and when it has its own name, then it makes it a little easier to follow, in my opinion. So this Let me back that out again. I can't just change the if to a while because we're using a different variable along the way, and it's the same register, just a different variable. So tread carefully. And now I think I can do that rename. Somewhat oddly, this inverted version where we're adding instead of subtracting was decompiled as a goto instead of a do while. For reasons. But it looks like the same logic. So that seems a bit nicer. Find where this is. So the logic doesn't quite match. So what's happening here is actually we're only looking at the X component here. So we use the load half macro up here on line 75. Should be able to find where that is. Not seeing a line number over here though. I think we can go directly, assign that directly to X and then check X against 0. And then here we're basically doing the same thing. Just subtracting 7C as long as we're greater than negative 3F. And then we can get rid of a lot of that other stuff. And so other than the stack pointer, this seems fine. And the rest of this fell out and looks like that is correct. Seven C, what is going to be 120, 122, 123. $124. So we're doing something similar here where we're kind of going along and adding 124 as we're going. And so I think this bar v03 can go away. I'm looking at the loops here and seeing if there's ever a case where we need to worry about it. So after we get past this loop 19 label, var v03 hasn't done anything yet, and then we're assigning it to x, so we can do x plus equals 124 here. Now var v0 underscore 3 will be the same as x at this point. And the reason this is being done down here is so that it's available when we get to the end of the loop. They could have left this out and put the loop right after 87. The optimizer could have, but the optimizer decided not to. That could be due to alignment. It could be due to a bunch of different things. Ultimately, this whole thing is a while prim is not null. And so that's kind of what we need to look at while going through this. And x being less than 256, 257. So I'm going to, so if x is less than 257, basically we're going to continue. So let's change this to a while prim is not null. I don't think the var v0 underscore 3 is necessary anymore. And this is the end of the loop. And so this other condition actually comes after the loop. We don't need this. Basically, if x is less than 257, we're going to continue. So if x is greater than or equal to greater than 256, that makes more sense. We're going to break. And then we're going to check if primitive is, we're going to do another while loop to grab the additional primitives that may not have been processed in that loop and set their draw mode. Draw mode 8 is going to be likely hidden or something like that. Look that up and confirm that. Yeah, draw hide is draw mode 8. Um, 256 is our horizontal resolution. So I think what we're doing is basically just not drawing things that are off the screen. There's some this assignment is just going to be inline y0 and y1. And same thing here. And I don't think these casts are going to be necessary. And draw mode 2 is not known. We don't know what that is. We have enough code now, though, that we can figure that out. These assignments, when the fields are out of order, it usually indicates that these are being assigned inline. And when we look at the PSP version, usually we can confirm that. I haven't been looking at the progress, but we're getting closer. If there's any questions along the way, feel free to reach out and chat. Happy to answer anything that you want to know about SOTN or about this. I'll do less well at the SOTN questions, but I can answer things about these overlays or anything like that. Again, these fields are out of order, indicating that they're assigned in line. So let's see what else. So now I have, before I was saying that I didn't have enough variables on the stack, now I have too many variables on the stack, or a variable of the wrong size on the stack. Maybe one extra and one of the wrong size. A few register issues, and the register issues may work themselves out when I get the right types. Some possible out of order stuff down here needs to be figured out. And then a branch that's going to slightly the wrong place, but that's just because of the stack being wrong. So getting pretty close. I do want to check this line 57 and just make sure that it is falling through. And that looks to be the case. It doesn't look like there is anything there. It is an ad break. I'm going to take a break myself. Stand by, and I will be back with more Soten Decomp. All right, we're back. And still working on this function. Don't know what it is. Maybe I will put this into DuckStation when this is done. We can go see what it is. So the main issue at the moment is this section here, which M2C was struggling with. a bit. So let's kind of walk through each of these and see if we can figure out what's going on. So we have a global S vector, and we're, instead of this, instead of the address to this function being loaded directly into register A0, the address is being loaded into S1 and then S1 being moved into A0. That, is my mouse not available on the screen? I like spinning my mouse around to highlight where I'm working. Oh, it looks like capture is broken. So let me try to restart capture for the browser. There we go. So this move into A0, the contents of S1, usually that will just load directly into the argument register. It may have to do with alignment. It may have to do with something else that I'm not sure about yet. What that is, I don't know. And then there is some, the order of these loads. So we're loading this 400 into V0 and storing that into offset 20. What I think I may try to do is figure out where the additional variable is coming from on the stack and see what's going on there. It may be this SXY. We may be able to just use X. No. We definitely can't do that. Why would anybody think we could do that? Oh, I see. I made a mistake along the way. Up here, this is supposed to be C8, which I eliminated for a read from array access, but that didn't seem to be correct. So now that this all works and is correct. There still is some issues here. So stack pointer issue, which isn't a huge concern. But let's work this out. So we're taking the offset from the stack pointer, 18 from the stack pointer, x18, loading that address into A1. And then that A1 isn't being used again until down here on line 69. So why are we adding to that location and then not doing anything with it? Because here it's just being overwritten. Because we're loading the value of this transformation matrix argument. Okay. So that's what that is. It's happening way out of order compared to the rest of this. But nothing related to the vector needs to be completed then. So why it's happening that way, I don't know, but that is the way that it's happening. The vector, let me just double check the signature for transformation matrix and make sure that I have the right signature. So regular vector. All right, and so we're loading position X. into V1. In our case, we're loading it into V0. Subtracting 80, that 80 subtraction is happening out of order. One thing I might try to do, but I don't typically see it often, is do this as a struct literal. So here we're storing 0 into offset 1C versus 1,4. And that may be the issue. So V0 is being stored into offset 10. And so we have 18, 1C, and 20. So that does, oh, I'm overwriting. The wrong, there we go. So now it's just a stack pointer issue. So there's something on the stack that is the wrong size. All of these temp and V1 should go away. SXY, those need to be 32. Primitive index. So now actually our stack is too small. I am going to, let's look down here. Line 63 is there any hint that this should be a 32-bit value instead of a 16-bit value? I don't see anything. I will make these 32-bit values just in case. But yeah, those doesn't work out that way. The other thing is maybe P and flag are not actually there and null is being passed in. I don't know what happens when you pass null to this function. They are being pointed to by stack addresses though. And they should be 32-bit values. All right, so what else can we change? I'm going to reorder these slightly. For GCC, usually variable order doesn't matter. It will use the variables in whatever order they're used in the function. On MetroWorks, if we were doing this for PSP, we would have to worry about variable declaration order. So what it appears is that there's an additional two 32-bit values that I am not using. And so we can try to figure out what those are. It's possible that this Y calculation is happening in one of them. Where else could a variable be? And it's also possible that none of that's the case, and it's just instruction ordering that's causing the issue. So one thing I can do is pull out I can add a pointer here. I don't think that's going to make a difference though. So at times like this, it's good to go to the PSP version, which will give us a little bit more information. And so what I need is some guide stone or marker or some unique value. I try to choose a immediate value if I can, or an offset into a known structure that's going to have enough entropy that I'm only going to find one or two functions. This hex 400, maybe. This greater than or equals to, this can often cause issues as well. So greater than or equal to is going to be the same as greater than negative 64. Sometimes that pokes things just the right way when you change the comparison. Okay, so the hex 400, that's just the general screen geometry though, so anything setting the screen geometry is gonna likely use that value, but I don't have a better choice at the moment, so I'm gonna use that one. Do I have the long library pulled out for the PSP? I do. And there's quite a bit that's using that. I am going to look for some of the transformation functions are less common. So I'm going to look for those. They're not mapped either. Bummer. Let's try rotate matrix. Okay, rotate matrix is great. So use the L option to list the files that match, a handful of them. And then I'm going to grep for X400 there, and I'm going to get exactly the same set of files. A little smaller, okay. So we're down a few. That's good. A bunch of them in this B7F0 split. All right, let's find another unique value. 4C, which is 72. That's a quirky number. The same ones. All right. 124, I think, was 7C. A few less. Get rid of the matching. Actually, the U, I should have started here. The U and V coordinates are relatively unique as well as the color lookup table. So let me try those. Okay. This may be our winner. So we have a few other signals to look for. So we should have an initialize entity function call relatively close to the top, which we do. Allocate primitives relatively close to the top. We want a this hex 800,000, which is the flags for the entity that matches 34 What's that? I want to find the immediate values F, 35, 82. I don't see FF. I do see FD, 32, 70. So this looks pretty promising. I'm going to take that, and hopefully this is our PSP version. And we'll create a new scratch for that. I'm going to make sure that I have the correct definition for primitive. So I mentioned this before. The primitive is a Poly GT4 in the PlayStation 1 SDK. I'm not sure why they did this for the PSP. They introduced a 32-bit value immediately after the pointer. So this came out in 2007, I believe. It's possible that they were working on 64-bit machines and may have had a slightly different version of this. Actually, no. Maybe they. I don't know how much of the Xbox stuff was used, and I can't remember if the Xbox version is compiled for PowerPC 32 or 64, but maybe there was some 64-bit safeness that was introduced during the Xbox 360 port. I haven't looked too closely at that. There are versions that are safe to decompile, and I do own those versions. Oh, I see. It's just the mask. That's what the FF was for. I do need to review the licenses for those again, just to make sure that that is safe. But I think those are safe. So we can flip between M2C's decompile and the one that I've been working on for the PlayStation and see what may be missing. And already on line 18, I see there's a sign extend for primitive index in my code, and there's not over here, which tells me that primitive index should be assigned 32. And so that helps already. On line 19, there is this shift for primitive buffer. And it looks like this is just out of order. No, maybe not. Let's look at what M2C says about that. Oh, flags is getting set first, and then primitive index. So GCC had these very much out of order. And this is getting extremely close now, if not completely matching. A few issues still here. So stack offset differences. This is suggesting that I have too much on the stack as opposed to too little, like the PlayStation says. Down in line 57. So SXY is a 32-bit value. The signature for rotate perspective and the documentation, basically this is two packed 16-bit numbers in one 32-bit value instead of using a struct or anything like that. They decided just to use a long 32-bit type, signed 32-bit type. And so what the PSP is saying that we should do is not try to load that as a half word, but just I can do this. Just mask it. And I want to make sure, so this is offset 44 and offset 1C, those line up in terms of, so there's some ordering issues to deal with. This seems like it should be happening possibly much earlier. Usually, or when I've seen these in the past, they okay, that works. The vector and matrix, and maybe it's ordered matrix and vector. Nope, that is the right ordering. All of our offsets work. They're declared very late. It is possible with, no, it wouldn't work out for GCC. I was going to say maybe these are declared down here in line with the case. The version of GCC that's being used, though, doesn't allow variable declaration inside of a switch. So that's unlikely. The PSP version now is looking very good. And in fact, I only see immediate differences for some of the symbols. And those are things that we can't really control in decomp.me. We're going to have differences there. Decomp.me doesn't have enough context. But this looks like it works. So I'm going to take this back over to... so it appears that the only difference between what was here on the PlayStation version and what we did for the PSP version was to fix the ordering of these fields up here, the assignment to those fields, and then change some of the ordering of variables. So pretty minimal change. And let's see if that was enough to get the PlayStation to work, and it's not. It's not. All right, so what else? What do you want from me, PlayStation? So we still have, basically, there was no change at all. I'm going to go back to the PSP side. When a function comes over and compiles as easily as this one did, and matches so quickly on the PSP, usually but not always is that a good sign that that you have the right thing. And the PSP helps with types and assignment, and we have all that correct from the PSP perspective. There is a few things that I do see that are likely wrong when we're initializing entities. The einit structure is a where is that declared? It should be an array, and we don't take a reference to the array. So it's possible that that addressing is something that the PlayStation cares about. In this case, it does not. It's still curious to me that the size of the stack here is 2 32-bit values smaller than the original. I don't think that... let me try this. So adding a second vector, which is also 2 32-bit values, increases our stack size too much. I think that would be a compatible change with the PSP, because the PSP will ignore that unused variable. When you put structs into your local variables, GCC allocates stack space for them regardless of whether you're going to use them or not, which is curious. Oh, an S vector. Let's put an S vector. All right, so that's matching. This would be a terrible, horrible hack. Let's move that inspector around. And there we go. So we just needed a superfluous vestigial local variable. Want. And we have a match. So now what do? We take this match. It's matching on the PSP. It's matching on the PlayStation. We have to, and always need to remember to celebrate. And then go back to where this was. The PSP without optimization, Metro works. So Orphis, to highlight what you just mentioned, says the PSP compiler could be reusing the space from the unused variable instead of allocating a second one. The PSP compiler is very stupid. I shouldn't say it's stupid. It has zero optimizations enabled, and so when that happens, it tries to do very little. But one of the things that it does do is keeps track of what variables are used and which are not, and will appropriately not allocate space for them if they're not used, even when you don't have optimization turned on. GCC usually does that for primitive types, but for arrays and this version of GCC 2.6.3, it can't handle structs and arrays on the stack for reasons I don't know. Let's see, we have undefined reference. I'm going to, I forgot that I rebased, so I'm going to extract again and need to restart my capture for terminal. Usually I won't have to rebuild the entire project, but in this case, I am. And this may be related to my splat change. So I think, a couple things. Undefined reference, that is an issue to the change that I just made. So this was something that was generated in the assembly originally. And the problem is, well, one of the problems, I'm going to back this out, this change out. When I extracted without the include ASM line in there, Splat is not going to extract the assembly related to that function. So I do want to still generate that assembly file so I can reference it. I'm going to touch the lib config and then run extract again. And do my grep again. So I'm not sure why that's not showing up. The next thing I'm going to do is look for the assembly file that is being loaded. F280. And so at some point between when I pulled this assembly and now, there was another change that mapped that global to init interactable. So I'm going to change that over in Splat. That's some common initialization data. It didn't used to be named, but it's kind of nice that it is named. And I am going to build this before. Okay, so we're building fine. And get rid of include ASM, and we should have a match. And we do. So another match. And this match will match on the PSP version as well. I have done some other work in the long library space to make sure that this was building on the PSP as well, related to the shop. I think all the shop stuff should build on both sides. In this case, this likely isn't pulled out yet, and so it'd be a little more work to get this compiling in the build system for PSP as well. I probably will do that work though before submitting this, because it'd be nice to just make sure there's no regression that comes from this. There are some other things like flags and some of the fields that we have special enums for. A linter will take care of most of those, so I'll take a look at it once before. It's a little later than I'd like to be, but yeah, I'll probably do this tomorrow. I do want to see what this entity is, and like I said, it does look like it's possibly something that is 3D. The only 3D things I can think of in the library are the books, but it could be something else. And yeah, maybe it's something else. So following up on the chat, I wouldn't say MetroWorks is stupid. It's just different. I'm used to GCC and the idiosyncrasies of GCC and like 25 years of GCC. And so this is the vintage of GCC that we're using here is not that different from things that I've seen in GCC for a long time. So it's just what I'm used to. So MetroWorks comes along and it does things differently than GCC. And so it's just different. And I rage. I didn't grow up with GCC. I've never used it professionally. So MetroWorks. I never used MetroWorks professionally. A lot of people did though. So I'm sure it does its own thing. What are my goals for decompiling? I like the game and I like the challenge of doing this. That's mainly why I'm doing it. Is I just want to know more about Symphony of the Night. I think it's one of the best games ever made, and it holds up 30 years later. 30 years later. So that's primarily my interest. I do think seeing, the idea of future ports and porting to systems or platforms where there isn't a native version of Symphony of the Night would be fun. I'm probably less interested in the ROM hacking aspects and modding aspects of it. The way the game is written is not terribly mod friendly. The randomizer community and speedrunning community have done a ton of work doing ROM hacks and finding addresses and offsets for all the things. And basically, you have to repeat the same process in every stage because code and data is duplicated for every stage overlay. Something like I have thought about something like a stage editor, and that could be fun and an alternate project, but mostly I a couple months ago, I guess it's close to a year now, I was looking for something related to decompilation, was streaming other or watching other streams on Symphony of the Night and just checked to see if there was a project, and there wasn't. It was in a much earlier stage a year ago, and thought I could help, and here I am. And then what is so people are modding or wanting to mod, and some people have created some neat things already, and some people like speedrunning and randomizer community, that's kind of modding. Some people are in it for the challenge, and I think that's kind of where I am at the moment. I like the game. I like the puzzle solving. I like going through and looking at some stuff that I really haven't thought about in 20 years or so, with a lot of this old technology. And then porting, I think, is the other main reason that people are doing it. That, and like I said, that's a neat goal as well, but not my primary goal. And just learning more. There's interesting things. Like a couple weeks ago, we were looking at the chair and the code for that, and there's just weird esoterica. Like you can't have any other button pressed when you press up to sit in a chair, because it's not masking the input pad. It's checking specifically for the up key as the only, a strict equality check on the up key. That's the kind of stuff I enjoy. Totally random. Oh, you worked on Wii titles. No, I do not work in the game industry. I've never worked in the game industry. I would have loved to work in the game industry as a career path, especially when I was younger. As an adult, having learned what the game industry did to a lot of people and how it's kind of a meat grinder. I went through a different meat grinder path. The Fang route, not the game route, and yeah, so never been in the games industry. Have only romantically thought about it, and this lets me do some game programming without having to do with it. Do you still work in the games industry, Orpheus? Yeah, yeah, fangs are nice if you like that kind of thing. It's stable. It's interesting a lot of the times, if you if you are on the right teams. So we've been decompiling parts of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. If you want to know more about that project, go to soten.z.dev, and you can see the progress we've completed so far. I mentioned last week, River Nix came in and just said, "Hey, I decompiled the abandoned mine. Here you go." Stealth drop of the entire thing. Pretty awesome. We've been working on the long library. It's been taking about a month or so for each of the stages. Some quicker, some less quick. NO1 kind of stalled out at the end there, but we have been getting much quicker on doing these. I've been super busy outside of the stream, and so I've not been doing a lot of tooling work. I still do have some ideas for tooling to help with dupes that hopefully will help things go a little quicker. Yeah, I'm not I haven't been at a Fang for quite a while, and there are issues. Every place has its issue. I think in general, I recommend it to people, especially when they're younger and have more stamina and can learn a lot of tools, a lot of ways to remain agile at a gigantic company. At least that was my experience. All right, I think that's all I have. I did mention um, last week as well. I have a backup CD from Probe from, I believe, Andy Brock. I reached out to him. I don't have any contacts in the industry or anything like that. He's at Blizzard now, big important guy at Blizzard. Um, in the 90s, it looks like he was working at Acclaim and Probe, and I obtained one of his backup CDs that has sound effects from Mortal Kombat, Rainbow Islands for the Saturn, and Die Hard Trilogy. And so I reached out to him just through LinkedIn to see if he would shed any light on any of that work that he was doing or any experiences really that he wanted to share. And he hasn't gotten back to me. I don't really expect a reply. It's kind of an odd message to send somebody, hey, I have your backup. What can you tell me about it? But if I find anything interesting there's some notes that are pretty cool from the original developer of Rainbow Islands to the sound engineers working at Acclaim at the time, describing how various sounds were pulled out, because Rainbow Islands was originally an arcade game. And so going and converting those to Redbook CD audio or sequences, whatever, for the Saturn is kind of interesting. But yeah, like I said, that's it. I'll be back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific time. And I think we'll play through the game a little bit and see if we can figure out what entity was decompiled today. That's it. Adios.